It's your boy. If you are a repeat listener, then welcome back. You already know what we're about. You already know what to expect. But if this is your first time listening, if this is your first time watching, then welcome. All of that is unclear. And maybe it'll become more clear by the end of the episode. But this time we're talking about, well, in fact, we're going to pick up where we left off last time and continue the conversation around ChatGPT and AI and the revolutions therein. Because I feel like I've just continued to see it in the news. I've continued to see it on the internet. I've continued to see it on LinkedIn specifically. And I feel like I've talked about, specifically ChatGPT, but all things AI with a number of people and people that I might not expect to talk about it with. People are outside the industry, as it were, certainly of tech and certainly of any industry sort of being disrupted currently. And different people have different opinions, and that's fantastic. And like last time, we were really looking at it from a very zoomed out perspective and the kind of positive aspects of being a link in a long chain of sort of evolutionary events. That's a very romantic prospect and a very exciting idea to some, and tells a sort of grand narrative about progress and the direction maybe and the purpose of that progress. But of course, it's scary when you're in it, and that I think is what came up time and time again when I was talking to people about the AI revolution. Is that it's scary when you're inside it and you're the one, if not losing your job, directly, if you're the one who's having the parameters of their role sort of disrupted and changed and influenced in any way. And while, AI is very sort of specific in that it hits the fear of like, well, what if I lose my job to something that isn't even alive? Some lines of code. What if I lose my job to that? What does it say about my job? What does it say about me? What does it say about my relevance? And what does it say about the thing that I sort of chose to specialize in? And losing your job in any capacity is incredibly disruptive and painful and possibly sort of destabilizing event. But if you also factor in the fact that even if you stay in your job and don't immediately lose it to a robot, that still the parameters of what you do and the parameters of what defines success may also be changed, right? Because the AI can now do this and do that, and whatever other new tool can achieve a certain amount of content creation or a certain amount of productivity that maybe you're able to access and hit sometimes, but because it would be considered grunt work, offsetting it to the AI means you can do one thing and then maybe you can focus on something else, right? And that, obviously stuck with me. I think, again, it's nice to stand back and say, oh, isn't it great what these revolutions and these new tools will bring us? But being in it is disruptive and scary and not all that fun. And that's why I ended up understanding it a bit more, I think, the fear that is felt in those moments. Because, I myself am looking for new work in my own industry, and I observe how that industry is changing around me. And this isn't even to do with ChatGPT. It may be to do with other tools, and it may be to do with other influences and different evolutions of like the same resources that I used to use to do my job, now are being used by different people in new and inventive ways that I have to keep up with. And that's a sort of self-propelling force, but it still is a force that impacts my industry, forces me to change, and maybe gets me out of a job. And when I'm sort of applying for new work, or even if I'm just trying to exist within my current role, the forces of the way the job is currently done force me to change along with it. And then I am currently in an industry that is impacted by huge economic headwinds, like the impact that COVID had upon the tech industry, and how people sort of hired in that environment. And now a lot of those companies are firing in that environment, and in a different environment, which is, the sort of inflation and whatever, all of these economic fallouts of the way we handled COVID. So these forces, economic huge swings of charts like this, or massive quantum leaps in technology, are so outside of our control and so difficult to, in some cases, difficult to anticipate, but certainly always difficult to anticipate the ways in which they will impact the work you have chosen to do, potentially for a decent period of time, right? And so the obvious question turns inward. And it's like, well, okay, if the job changes, if the parameters of success change, if the sort of environment of hiring and firing has changed, what is it about me and about the things that I can do that keeps me in the game? That keeps me on top of things even as the tools change? That keeps me employed even as there are mass layoffs and reshuffling and restructuring of these larger companies? What differentiates me from the new tool, even if the new tool is an automated AI for doing what my job has always been at lightning speed? What do I bring to the table? And ultimately, it's then a very existential question, right? You don't want to bring your whole self to work, and you want to think that what you do in the sort of productive sort of, capitalist nature of the word, or the question, what do? You want to think that that doesn't define you. But when you're sat there thinking like, well, why am I better than a robot? Then of course you're suddenly looking at not just your ability to work and be at the 9 to 5 as opposed to your regular life, but now you're talking about why am I as a human better than a machine, right? So sort of big existential questions that get rolled into what you're already feeling, which is the pressure upon yourself to change with the industry that is currently changing around you. If you want to stay relevant, if you want to stay employed, if you want to stay happy, dare I say it. And so for me, what I've tried to land upon as I've asked these questions of myself is that yes, I can deliver. I deliver work, great. But what we're suggesting is like one day an AI might deliver. So I deliver. But I deliver to what I think is a nice high standard. And I can also communicate soft skills, you understand? I can communicate with designers, with other developers, with clients, with project managers. And I can explain what I'm doing. I can justify myself as a resource cost. I can suggest a great idea for where the project might go. I can describe how we're going to complete the goals of what the project is about before I even start doing the thing that ostensibly I'm being paid money for, which is outputting code. So at the end of the day, even I could put ChatGPT to use for the outputting of the code part, but I think for a long time in the future, the part of me being able to communicate, describe, explain, ideate, the human soft skills are the part that I won't be able to replace. And in the same sense, they're the part that would keep me employed even if other parts of the industry were to change. Or it would try to set me apart in a field where hiring and firing are happening at crazy rates and crazy turnovers. You would hope that it's not the code in as much as how much can you output per minute, but it's the way that you can communicate about the code, or it's the way that you can communicate about the copy in the case of the other industries, more in the text part of marketing, that is being threatened by the existence of ChatGPT. So it got me thinking about the opposite. What is a profession that I've come into contact with where the opposite is true? Right? Where soft skills are abundant, but delivery needs help. Stay with me. I'm trying not to get too inside baseball here. I'm trying to keep this a all-purpose podcast for all listeners. But let me just describe to you, I've done a lot of work in digital design agencies and digital marketing agencies and traditional marketing agencies. And broadly speaking, okay, there are developers like me who build the thing, make the thing, grumble about how the thing is going to be hard to make, but ultimately put the thing out, okay? So my soft skills in that industry, as I'm describing, is being able to do more than grunt about why it's not going to work like that. And also being able to describe and work out how we're going to face each of these projects that we do as the team of developers and how we're going to deliver it on time, okay? Developers, that's one group of us. Over here we got the designers. And I'm just going to lump in with the designers for now, sometimes copywriters as well. Don't at me, you'll understand why, okay? The designers take creative briefs and they take the client's goals for the project and they describe what the site is going to be like, or the digital product or the digital advert, and they do so in design programs and in words, and they communicate and they get it across. So their soft skills, they're able to communicate and interpret and ideate, especially they're all about the creativity, but also they're able to deliver. And they have a handoff, which is like design files or a copy deck or things like this. So they're able to describe what the digital thing is going to be. They pass it to the developers, our first group. They do the thing. Okay? You're still with me, thankfully. Finally, we have what I think of as the worst people in the world, which is everybody else. And I say that because they all have different revolving titles, and they're all the worst. Okay? Definitely at me on this. Okay? We got like project managers, we got like product managers, we got, producers in some cases, we got anybody else who's not involved necessarily in the design and build process stresses me out. And a huge part of why they stress me out, and I had to avoid doing a whole episode about just this, so I'm going to try and keep it short. And again, thanks for joining me on this more inside baseball part of this podcast. But it is usually the case, I have found it to be the case, that the others, right? The not designers, the not devs, they lose sight of what happens with the digital product. And they don't fill it with any content. So we do the design, we do the build, we launch the website, but there's no words to go on it. There's no blog posts. There's no about page that tells you. There's no meet the team section. Maybe the designers have also managed to get some nice images together. Fantastic. But there's no words. Now, I mentioned copywriters earlier, and maybe if it's a good shop, they will engage a copywriter, and just like the designer, they'll take in a brief and they will deliver. But so much of the time that does not happen. So now we have a beautifully designed, exquisitely built website ready to go, and there's no words ready to go on it. Someone just needs to write the content. Do you see where I'm going with this? It is my belief that the AI revolution, and specifically ChatGPT, could be used to plug this most horrific gap in the workflow of my particular industry, which has plagued 95% of projects that I've worked on. It's absolutely wild how many times I've gotten to launch day, launch week, launch hour, and somebody's gone like, oh shit, do we need to write something on the about page? Oh, what are we gonna say? So here are people, the project managers, the account people, the skeptics, the hopefuls, the planners, who've been managing this project the whole time, and they don't have words on the day because they've got a bunch of soft skills, okay? They love to communicate, they love to talk, they love to engage, they love to, bridge the gap between departments and peoples, but they don't deliver. And I mean that in the sense of, where is the hard stuff that comes out of your negotiations? And I'm not talking about the paper trail of emails. I'm talking about the bits and words that describe who the company is, what the project's doing, what the initiative is all about, and 15 blog posts that support that, which you said we'd need the blog part of the website for, right? Where's that? I suggest engage the AI. Get the ChatGPT to write it, because what inevitably happens is, in the rush to get this content out, there's two things. It doesn't launch, and then it never launches. The new digital website, app, advert, whatever, it just never launches, even though it's built, because we haven't got the words for it. Or two, the client's cousin writes it whilst, watching TV, and copies most of it, from the art of a blog post from the previous site, and then he just peppers in some Wikipedia, truly god-awful, dreadful. So in the hope to get it out the door, and in the wish to elevate it just beyond that dreadful writer's hell that I've just described, I suggest give it to the robots. If they're so keen to write, if they're so keen to take our jobs, take those jobs. Fill that gap. Because I believe that can help everybody in the process, including the client, and it can really change the stakes of what we're doing here. And I think that is a part of the industry that no one is worried about covering for. No one wants to do that work. And so this is what I'm trying to say. When faced with the robot revolution, when faced with what we don't want to lose to this revolutionary technology, faced with huge external market forces altering the face of what our industry does, we have to choose and quickly identify the parts that we want to lose and push them towards the oncoming dreadful market forces. We have to say, yeah, that's the part. Let the AIs have the cheap content that's produced the night before we go live. Let them have it. That's going to be so helpful to us. And in fact, maybe there's a whole bunch of other things that these guys could write content for, because people clearly on the client side don't care about it. Otherwise it would have been written by now, or it would have been, clearly prioritized by a copywriter. So just pump it out, just get it out there. And also it just takes a human mind, a bunch of human minds away from thinking about what is clearly a mundane task, what is clearly a task that doesn't matter its outcome to a decent number of people. So take human people away from it. Let the robots do the shit stuff, is what I'm trying to say. Then we don't have to worry about our jobs because we got the soft skills. We can keep doing the creative stuff. We can keep doing the interesting stuff. Let them write your about page, because you don't care. We don't care. Or if you actually are objecting to what I'm saying right now and you do care, hire a copywriter and do it properly. And I've been thinking about this a lot since my last episode, but maybe before as well. And I came to this conclusion, that we should let the AIs take certain jobs because maybe it could be good for me. Maybe it could help my whole industry. Maybe it could help others related to my industry. Maybe it could help me specifically. And the question being, if it's deprioritized like this, and we're just serving up, bargain basement written content to people who are very casually scrolling the internet, then, we should take intelligent human minds that are more capable. We should take them off the job. And I was mulling all of this over in my mind. And then what should I see on that very same internet that I was scrolling? But that BuzzFeed has now decided to replace whole writers' rooms of journalists that were stuck in journalistic hell, pumping out listicles which have defined the past however many years of online content and ruined real journalism and ruined SEO forever and ruined having an opinion on anything, because now we have to look at this definitive top 10 list that BuzzFeed put together for us. BuzzFeed's decided to get rid of that writer's room and replace it all with AI writers. To which I say, incredible. To which I say, it's happening right now. Free those journalistic souls and let them go out into the world and do real written work. Let some dumb robot compare 15 different root vegetables, okay, to work out which is the best. Or, clips from Gilmore Girls. Whatever they're writing about now, I believe it to be beneath the writers. Right? And so the question becomes, who's reading it? Because if they were reading it before now, these kind of listicles and these ridiculouses, if that was how they were consuming news and content online, then did they not begin to feel like it was pretty scripted, pretty generic, kind of lame-ass stuff? Did they not begin to think that, this is just nonsense and I'm just reading it and I'm just scrolling through it? And if they didn't, and if they thought it's wonderful journalism the whole time, then, will they notice when those writers are trained, are replaced, I should say, by an AI trained on their own work. It'll be writing in that very familiar BuzzFeed listicle kind of style. It'll be writing about the same kind of stuff. And if they, the reader, don't notice, then, does it matter? But also, the question is, who is that's reading it? And who is the person that's going onto those sites and taking all of those content in? What is the job that they have, and is that being replaced by AI? But here we are at this moment in time where we can replace full writers' rooms that were pumping out this substandard, sort of below par kind of stuff, and they can be fully replaced by one machine learning algorithm, and maybe so can everything else that we don't want to do, that doesn't bring value to the internet. Maybe that can also be done by an AI. The question only remains, again, who is reading it? Because if we decide that no one's reading these pages, and no one's reading these BuzzFeed articles, and no one's reading these about pages on these websites, and we're getting AI to write them, and it's sort of another different algorithm that is actually reading them to just check them to make sure they're worthy of turning up on Google or worthy of appearing in your Facebook feed. If it's just kind of content going round, the people reading it don't feel anything, and maybe there's less and less people reading it, and it's more and more robots reading it, and then the robots outputting it. The question is, what are we making if not just white noise on the internet? And so again, my point would be, get the humans away from that. Humans shouldn't be creating white noise as a job. But in general, it does sound like as a species, humanity is just creating a lot of white noise on the internet. And that brings me to an internal reflection, I, too, have started to question whether I'm just producing white noise on the internet. And so I've sort of turned to the question that I was asking about the industry I actually earn money in, aka web development. And I've tried to turn it to my passion here of podcasting and of speaking into this microphone and speaking to you all and speaking to each of you. And I think the question is fairly pertinent, because I've said even publicly in this very venture that I'm just doing it to do it and doing it to experience it and do it to feel the feelings and put myself out there. And so the question becomes, is that enough? Does it need more reason? Does it need more justification than that? Is it more than white noise, and am I actually saying something? And I am still unsure, or I should say, I'm unclear on that question. That wasn't intentional. But what I've realized is the nature of what it is a little bit more. So thank you for joining me. You'll know, if you know me personally, that I have embraced the medium of voice notes recently. And if anybody else has done the same, maybe they've had the same thought that I have, which is at about, sort of 10 minutes into a voice note, that maybe you deserve to have your own show and just say these wise, intelligent things all the time. And that is exactly what's occurring here. I like to think that there are some soft skills, again, that I might possess, that I bring to the microphone here, that make it a bit different from that podcast or another. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm doing here is recording recording an open voice note. And I think that's why it was so fun when, people were also recording and sending one back, and we got to dissect and we got to interact to some degree. But I think that's what it is. I like to talk about things that I am thinking about all of the time. And I want to be clear that I'm not presenting it as if I know anything, but that this is my feeling on these things at this current time. And by talking about them and by putting them into words, it helps me clarify them for myself. And my only hope is that maybe it helps you clarify some thoughts that you are also having. And so if you want to hit me back, my inbox is very much open. And otherwise, as I say, this is an open voice note to you all. And once again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for doing this thing with me. And this has been another episode of Unclear.